Hello, hello, hello. How is everyone doing? I'm opening up my stream manager on my phone. I got distracted before starting the stream. That sounds good. Because I was playing Pokemon Go. Happens to the best of us. How do I? Yes. Okay. Uh, so yeah, how is everyone? It is a Thursday, which is my favorite day of the week, and it's been a good Thursday. That's why it's my favorite day of the week. Um, yeah, I don't know, I mean, I could have been more productive today, but alas. I had a pretty decent day. Um, and now we are going to continue reading Pride and Prejudice. Um, Last time I tried to do this, um, my stream quality was so bad that I ended up just ending the stream. So after reading a whole chapter, so I'm going to try this chapter again. So this is the second time I'm reading this chapter, but that's okay. So without further ado, I suppose we should just jump into chapter 18 of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Um, Before jumping in, I'm going to read, or no. I'm just going to start. Okay. Till Elizabeth entered the drawing room at Netherfield and looked in vain for Mr. Wickham along the cluster of red coats there assembled, a doubt in his being present had never occurred to her. The certainty of meeting him had not been checked by any of those recollections that might not unreasonably have alarmed her. She had dressed in more than usual care, and prepared in the highest spirits for the conquest of all that remained unsubdued to his heart, trusting that it was not more than might be won in the course of an evening. But in an instant arose the dreadful suspicion of his being purposely omitted for Mr. Darcy's pleasure in the Bingleys' invitation. Hi, Nev. Thanks for lurking. To the officers, and though he was not exactly the case, the absolute fact of his presence was pronounced by his friend Mr. Denny, of whom Lydia eagerly applied, and who told them that Wickham had been obliged to go to town on business the day before, and was not yet returned, adding, with a significant smile, I do not imagine his business would have been called him away just now, if he had not wished to avoid a certain gentleman here. This part of his intelligence, though unheard by Lydia, was caught by Elizabeth, and as it assured her that Darcy was not less answerable for Wickham's absence than if her first surmise had been just, every feeling of displeasure against the former was so sharpened by immediate disappointment that she could hardly reply with tolerable civility to the polite enquiries which he directly afterwards approached to make. Attention, forbearance, patience with Darcy was injury to Wickham. She was resolved against any sort of conversation with him, and turned away with a degree of ill humour which she could not wholly surmount even in speaking to Mr. Bingley, whose blind partiality provoked her. But Elizabeth was not formed for ill humour, and though every prospect of her own was destroyed for the evening, it could not dwell long on her spirits, and having told all her griefs to Charlotte Lucas, whom she had not seen for a week, she was soon able to make a voluntary transition to the oddities of her cousin, and to point out to her particular notice. The two first dances, however, brought a return of distress. They were dances of mortification. Mr. Collins, awkward and solemn, apologizing instead of attending, and often moving wrong without being aware of it, gave her all the shame and misery with a disagreeable partner for a couple of dancers can give. The moment of her release from him was ecstasy. She danced next with an officer, and had the refreshment of talking to Mr. Wickham, and of hearing that he was universally liked. When those dances were over, she returned to Charlotte Lucas, and was in conversation with her, when she found herself suddenly addressed by Mr. Darcy, who took her so much by surprise in his application for their hands that, without knowing what she did, she accepted him. He walked away again immediately, and was left to fret over her own want of presence of mind. Charlotte tried to console her. I dare say you will find him very agreeable. Heaven forbid! That may be the greatest misfortune of all, to find a man agreeable whom one is determined to hate. Do not wish me such an evil. When the dancing recommenced, however, and Darcy approached to claim her hand, Charlotte could not help cautioning her, with a whisper, not to be a simpleton, and to allow her fancy for Wickham to make her appear unpleasant in the eyes of a man of 10 times his consequence. Elizabeth made no answer, and took her place in the set, amazed at the dignity to which she had arrived in being allowed to stand opposite to Mr. Darcy, and reading in her neighbours' looks their equal amazement in beholding it. They soon for some time without speaking a word, and she began to imagine that their silence was to last through the 2 dances, and at first she resolved not to break it, till suddenly, fancying that it would be the greater punishment to her partner to oblige him to talk, she made some slight observation on the dance. He replied, and was silent again. After a pause of some minutes, she addressed him a second time with, "It is your turn to say something now, Mr. Darcy. I talked about the dance, and you ought to make some sort of remark on the size of the room, or the number of couples." He smiled, and assured her that whatever she wished him to say should be said. "Very well. That reply will do for the present. Perhaps by and by I may observe the private balls are much more pleasanter than public ones, but now we may be silent." "Do you talk by rule, then, when you are dancing?" "Sometimes. One must speak a little, you know. It would be odd to be entirely silent for half an hour together. And yet, for the advantage of some, conversation ought to be so arranged as they may have the trouble of saying as little as possible." "Are you consulting your own feelings in the present case, or do you imagine that you are gratifying mine?" "Both," replied Elizabeth archly, "for I have always seen a great similarity in the turn of our minds. We are each of an unsocial, taciturn position, unwilling to speak, unless we expect to say something that will amaze the whole room, and be handed down to the possibility with the eclat of a proverb." "This is not very striking resemblance of your own character, I am sure," said he. "How near it is to be mine, I cannot pretend to say. You think it a faithful portrait, undoubtedly." "I must not decide on my own performance." He made not answer, and they were again silent, till they had gone down the dance, when he asked her if she and her sisters did not very often walk to Meryton. She answered in the affirmative, and, unable to resist the temptation, added, "When you meet us there the other day, we have been forming a new acquaintance." The effect was immediate. A deeper shade of hauteur overspread his features, and he said not a word. And Elizabeth, though blaming herself for her own weakness, could not go on. At length Darcy spoke, and in a constrained manner said, "Mr. Wickham is blessed with such happy manners as may ensure his making friends. Whether he may be equally capable of retaining them is less certain." "He has been so unlucky as to lose your friendship," replied Elizabeth with emphasis, "and in a manner which he is likely to suffer from all his life." Yo. What the hell did you just say? I like Gaiet Diem nerd. Oh, I see. Hi, Alan. I hope your stream is going well. Where was I? Darcy made no answer and seemed desirous of changing the subject. At that moment, Sir William Lucas appeared close to them, meaning to pass through the set of the other side of the room, but on perceiving Mr. Darcy, he stopped with a bow of superior courtesy to compliment him on his dancing and his partner. I have been most highly gratified indeed, my dear sir. Such very superior dancing is not often seen. It is evident that you belong in the first circles. Allow me to say, however, that your fair partner does not disgrace you, and that I must hope to have the pleasure often repeated, especially when a certain desirable event, my dear Miss Eliza, glancing at her sister and Bigley, shall take place. What congregations will flow in? What should I read first? Pride and Prejudice or A Thousand Splendid Suns? I don't know. I'm not familiar with A Thousand Splendid Suns. Is that also Jane Austen? I'm looking it up. No. Khalid Hosseini. I think you should read that one first. I think you should read that. Um, Also, hi, welcome. Welcome to the stream. Um, it's not that I'm not enjoying Pride and Prejudice. Like, it's interesting to read, but I don't know. It's a bit boring. It's very high society. It's a good book to listen to. Like, I think it's calming and nice, and I feel like I'm learning a bit about like kind of the birth of like, well, not the birth, but like earlier romance. And it's definitely like a social commentary, which is nice to experience as well. But yes, it's just a bit like stiff is a great descriptor. Stiff is definitely a word I would use. Um, but I'm gonna stick it out and finish reading it aloud on stream. But yeah, I wanted to read it so I would be exposed to this, but now that I'm here, I'm like, okay, I get it. I think I might want to read one more, like on my own, not on stream, but on my own when I'm done with this one. Like I might read Emma because I hear that one's really good. It also is very helpful that it's in the public domain. Not that I've ever gotten in trouble for reading stuff on stream that isn't public domain, and I do it all the time, but like it's nice to have the security of public domain. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I'm just like not really getting that into it. But tell me about what gravitates you toward A Thousand Splendid Suns. I'm curious. Because I've never heard of it. I just looked it up. I saw it was published in 2007. Oh my gosh. Wuthering Heights was such a drag for me at one point that it does scare me a bit getting into novel of that era. Yeah. Yeah. Totally fair. I know there are good novels of this era. I just can't think of them off the top of my head. But it was a different time. Writing was different then, you know? And it's cool to see how much it's evolved and it's become I feel like probably a lot more accessible now. Um, but yeah, or maybe we've just gotten dumber. But my sister gifted me when I was leaving my hometown. Gifted you Wuthering Heights or the Thousand Suns book. Oh, okay. Nice. That's nice. Well, I hope you enjoy it. Well, congratulations will flow in. I I appeal to Mr. Darcy, but let me not interrupt you, sir. You will not thank me for detaining you from the bewitching converse of that young lady, whose bright eyes are also upbraiding me. I kind of forgot that the word converse is more than just a shoe brand. It has a different um definition. And I know like converse, like to conversate, like to talk, but the bewitching converse of that young lady, I guess they mean like conversation, but I'm wondering if it has another definition now. Anyway, the latter part of this address was scarcely heard by Darcy, but Sir William's allusion to his friend seemed to strike him forcibly, and his eyes were directed with a very serious expression toward Bingley and Jane, who were dancing together. Recovering himself, however, shortly, he turned to his partner and said, Sir William's interruption has made me forget what we were talking of. I do not think we were speaking at all. Sir William could not have interrupted any two people in the room who had less to say for themselves. We have tried two or three subjects, already without success, and what are we to talk of next I cannot imagine. What thinks you of books? Said he, smiling. Books! Oh, no, I am sure we have never read the same, or not with the same feelings. I am sorry you think so. But if that must be the case, there can at least be no want of subject. We may compare our different opinions. No, I cannot talk of books in a ballroom. My head is always full of something else. The present always occupies you in such scenes, does it? Said he, with a look of doubt. Yes, always, she replied, without knowing what she said, for her thoughts had wandered far from the subject. As soon as afterwards appeared by her suddenly exclaiming, I remember hearing you say once, Mr. Darcy, that you hardly ever forgave, that your resentment, once created, was unappeasable. You are very cautious, I suppose, as to its being created. I am, said he, with a firm voice. And never allow yourself to be blinded by prejudice? I hope not. It is particularly incumbent on those who never change their opinion to be secure of judging properly at first. May I ask what these questions tend? Merely to the illustration of your character, said she, endeavoring to shake off her gravity. I am trying to make it out. And what is your success? She shook her head. I do not get on at all. I hear such different accounts of you as puzzle me exceedingly. I can readily believe, answered he gravely, that report may vary greatly with the respect to me, and I could wish, Miss Bennet, that you were not to sketch my character at the present moment, as there is a reason to fear that the performance will reflect no credit on either. But if I do not take your likeness now, I may never have another opportunity. I would by no means suspend any pleasure of yours, he coldly replied. She said no more, and they went down to the other dance, and parted in silence, of each side dissatisfied, though not to an equal degree, for in Darcy's breast there was a tolerable, powerful feeling toward her, which soon procured her pardon, and directed all his anger against another. They had been not long separated when Miss Bingley came toward her, and with an expression of civil disdain thus accosted her. So, Miss Eliza, I hear that you are quite delighted by George Wickham. Your sister has been talking to me about him and asking me 1,000 questions, and I find that the young man forgot to tell you, among his other communications, that he was the son of old Wickham, the late Mr. Darcy's steward. Let me recommend you, however, as a friend, not to give implicit confidence to his assertions. For as to Mr. Darcy's using him ill, he is perfectly false, for, on the contrary, he has been always remarkably kind to him, though George Wickham has treated Mr. Darcy in a most infamous manner. I do not know the particulars, but I know very well that Mr. Darcy is not in the least to blame, that he cannot bear to hear George Wickham mentioned, and the thought my brother thought he could not well avoid including him in his invitation to the officers, he was excessively glad not to find that he had taken himself out of the way. His coming into the country at all is a most insolent thing indeed, and I wonder how he could presume to do it. I pity you, Miss Eliza, for this discovery of your favourite's guilt, but really considering his descent, one could not expect much better. His guilt and his descent appear by your account to be the same, said Elizabeth, angrily. For I have heard you accuse him of nothing worse than of being the son of Mr. Darcy's steward, and of that I can assure you he informed me himself. Hi, Doom. How you doomin'? How's life? Thanks for popping in. I'm good. How's you? I'm good. Um, loving the fall weather. Um, just applied for a new job. We'll see if I get it. And I don't know. Life just be lifing. Reading Pride and Prejudice, which I have mixed feelings about. Um, and yeah, hanging out. When I'm done with this, I'm gonna hang out with my roommate and we're gonna watch Doctor Who. Thank you. Yeah. I I have mixed emotions about that too, 'cause it'd be great to get it, but it's just because the job kind of seems like it's like made for me, but I do have a job. So if I took this on, I would have a second job, which seems doable now, but I don't know. I don't know if I should be doing this at all because I'm considering. Anyway, there are just a million factors that complicate it. But I felt silly not applying because this job seems like literally perfect for me. So we'll see about that. Let me know what your high low kudos is if you have one. I'll go first. My high was my coworkers and I were just like goofing around today and having a really fun time at work. So that was my high. My low is I wasn't nearly as productive this morning as I would have hoped. And kudos to my friend Dalton, who came over for literally like 10 minutes, but while I was cooking dinner, he stopped by my house to drop something off, and I wasn't expecting him. And it was really good to see him. Dalton, he's in Tryptophan, he plays bass. So it was a nice little surprise to see him. Okay, I'm gonna keep reading, but if you have a high low kudos, put it in the chat. Um, Low, I don't know. High, I get to see a cool little cluster of stars that appeared to fade in and out. Oh, that's so cool. Possibly interstellar dust or just the brightness varied off the edge of where I could see it. That's so sick. Do you stargaze often? That's so cool. What a great thing to catch. I love that. If I can, walking home. Oh, okay, nice. Very, very nice. I love that. Do you have a kudos? I've seen two shooting stars in the last 2 years. Oh my gosh, you're so lucky. Which isn't all that common in a city. No, not at all. Not in a city at all. Yeah, during the meteor showers every year, I try to hang out with my friend who lives outside of the city, and sometimes we're able to catch like multiple in one night, which is so nice. Okay. His guilt and his descent appear by your account to be the same, said Elizabeth angrily. For I have heard you accuse him of nothing worse than being the son of Mr. Darcy's steward, and of that I can assure you he informed me himself. I beg your pardon, replied Miss Bingley, turning away with a sneer. Excuse my interference. I was kindly meant. Insolent girl, said Elizabeth to herself. You are much mistaken if you expect to influence me by a paltry attack as this. I see nothing in it if your own wilful ignorance is the malice of Mr. Darcy. She then sought her eldest sister, who had undertaken to make enquiries on the same subject of Bingley. Jane met her with a smile of such sweet complacency, a glow of such happy expression, as sufficiently marked how well she was satisfied with the occurrence of the evening. Elizabeth instantly read her feelings, and at that moment solicitude for Wickham, resentment against his enemies, and everything else gave way before the hope of Jane's being in the fairest way of happiness. I miss being on the Greek islands because it's so dark. The sky is incredible. You see the Milky Way. It's mind blowing to try and imagine the scales. Oh my gosh, yeah. I would love to have an experience like that. That's so cool. I love stargazing and just like no, astronomical, because it's not astrological. Yeah. Events like the fuck. Yeah. Oh, wait. Also in the middle of a supermassive black hole. Whoa. Um, I've like traveled to see the solar eclipses, which is always really nice. Um, and yeah, that's so cool though. I want to stargaze more seriously. I want to know, said she, with a countenance no less smiling than her sister's, what you have learnt about Mr. Wickham. But perhaps you may have been too pleasantly engaged to think of any third person, in which ease you may be sure of pardon. No, replied Jane, I have not forgotten him, but I have nothing satisfactory to tell you. Mr. Bingley does not know the whole of his history, and is quite ignorant of the circumstances that have principally offered to Mr. Darcy, but he will vouch for the good conduct, the the probity and honor of his friend, and is peacefully convicted that Mr. Wickham has deserved much less attention from Mr. Darcy than he has received. And I am sorry to say that by his account, as well as his sister's, Mr. Wickham is by no means a respectable young man. I am afraid he has been very imprudent, and has deserved to lose Mr. Darcy's regard. when you look at it with all that in your head, it is, I guess, like that religious feeling some people get where they feel like they had a religious experience. It's kind of like that, I'm guessing. I don't know, almost out of body. Yeah, I mean, I feel like you can relate to it. I mean, you were just talking about like being able to see the Milky Way. Like I think for a lot of people, they find looking up at the night sky to be um kind of sad because it can remind you of how small you are. But I've always felt like, for me, I've always felt like it's the opposite. Like staring at the night sky and feeling how small I am is incredibly comforting. Which I think a lot of people probably feel that as well. But yeah, it just makes me so like, I feel comforted and it's like, yeah, okay, cool. It's like nice to think that my problems are so tiny um in comparison to like and just to think that I'm like such a tiny part of this like wonderful thing, and that like no matter how horribly things are going like in our country or in our world, at least like we're still even a really small part of this like huge system, and it's such a beautiful thing, you know? Yeah, that's why the stars are so nice to look at. Like, isn't it cool to think that one day Andromeda and the Milky Way are literally going to like crash into each other and everything's gonna end? Isn't that crazy? It's the only time the word awe could be applied to me. There are a lot of weird things. Yeah. Black holes are weird. Black holes are definitely weird. But care to explain why you are saying that they're weird? Explain why black holes are weird while I read this next section. Mr. Bingley does not know Mr. Wickham himself? No, he never saw him till the other morning in Meryton. The account, then, is what he has received from Mr. Darcy. I am perfectly satisfied. But what does he say of the living? He does not exactly recollect the circumstances, though he has heard from them that Mr. Darcy more than once, but he believes that it is left to him confidentially only. I have not a doubt of Mr. Bingley's sincerity, said Elizabeth warmly, but you must excuse me not being convicted by assurances only. Mr. Bingley's defense of his friend was a very able one, I dare say, but since he is unacquitted with several parts of the story and has learnt the rest from that friend himself, I shall venture him to think of both gentlemen as I did before. She then changed the discourse to one more gratifying to each, and on one there could be no difference of sentiment. Elizabeth listened with delight to the happy, though modest hopes which Jane entertained of Mr. Bingley's regard, and said all in her power to heighten her confidence in it. On their being joined by Mr. Bingley himself, Elizabeth withdrew to Miss Lucas, of whose enquiry after the pleasantness of her last partner has scarcely replied, before Mr. Collins came up to them and told her with great exultation that he had just been so fortunate as to make the most important discovery. Okay. Here's the thing, if you get sucked into a larger black hole, you wouldn't feel any major tidal forces. Interesting. Well, theoretically, on the event horizon, as time cannot escape escape that means time stops from the outside perspective, which is weird. As time escape, that means time stops from the outside perspective. That's so interesting. Light cannot escape. Oh, okay. But the speed of light relates to time. True. It's like a black hole that stores the events that happened in the moment of its creation, although that's a little bit of a conjecture. Whoa. That's so freaking cool. Literally, time stops. That's so crazy. And then the radiation it gives off. Hawking radiation contains no way to interfere what thing it came from, which is also weird. It conserves energy, but in a way you have no idea what made that stuff. Wow. But yeah, we don't even know if it actually does become a singularity. Doom, you clearly are more knowledgeable about astronomy than I am because you definitely lost me a little bit there. But that's so freaking cool. I saw a book at the library today. It was Astrophysics for People in a Hurry or something like that. It's a Neil deGrasse Tyson book. And I was like, I want that. That would be so freaking cool to read. Um, yeah. Maybe there is some law of physics we don't know about that means it goes close to a singularity but doesn't quite reach it and rebounds out the same other geometry. Send it in a podcast. Oh, please. Please, please, please send it my way. Oh my God, I keep dropping my phone. Yes, please. I would love to listen to that podcast. He had a #1 hit with a band in the 90s. Wow. Brian Cox. All right. Okay. I'm going to continue. Please send me that podcast, though. I'm very intrigued. I have found out, said he, by a singular accident, that there is now in the room a near relation of my patroness. I happened to overhear the gentleman himself mentioning to the young lady who does the honors of this house the names of his cousin, Miss de Bow, and the mother, Lady Catherine. How wonderful these sorts of things occur. Who would have thought of my meeting with, perhaps, a nephew of Lady Catherine de Bow in this assembly? I am most thankful that the discovery is made in time for me to pay my respects to him, which I am going to do, and trust he will excuse my not having done it before. My total ignorance of the connection must plead my apology. You are not going to introduce yourself to Mr. Darcy? Indeed I am. I shall entreat his pardon for not having done it earlier. I believe him to be Lady Catherine's nephew. It will be in my power to assure him that her ladyship was quite well yesterday se'night. Yes, he was a keyboard player in the band Dream, and his song was Things Can Only Get Better. I'm not familiar with it, but maybe I would know it if I heard it. That's so cool. See, people can do anything they want. You can be an astrophysics professor. I just got your text. And you can be in a hit band. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to do like 9 different things, man. It's crazy. Elizabeth tried hard to dissuade him from such a scheme, assuring him that Mr. Darcy would consider his addressing him without introduction as an impertinent freedom rather than a compliment to his aunt, that if it were not the least necessary, there should be any notice on either side, and that if it were, it must belong to Mr. Darcy, the superior consequence, to begin the acquaintance. Mr. Collins listened to her, and with the determined air of following his own inclination, and when she ceased speaking, replied thus: "If they are all your passions, why not?" Yeah, I think that's the right answer. Like, I think you should pursue everything that you're interested in and passionate in. But, man, it just leaves no time for rest. Like, I've really been valuing rest as I'm getting older, even though I feel like I have no time for it. But the few times that I can, it's so nice. And yeah, I don't know. I want to do all these things, but I think I would literally need to clone myself if I wanted to do all these things. Do you understand? Do you relate to this at all? Okay. My dear Miss Elizabeth, I have the highest opinion in the world of your excellent judgment in all these matters within the scope of your understanding. But permit me to say that there must be a wide difference between the established forms of ceremony amongst the laity and those which regulate the clergy. Forgive me leave to observe that I consider the clerical office as equal in point of dignity with the highest rank in the kingdom, provided that a proper humility of behavior is at the same time maintained. You must therefore allow me to follow the dictates of my conscience of the occasion, which leads me to perform what I look on as the point of duty. Pardon me for neglecting to profit by your advice, which on every other subject shall be my constant guide, though in the case before us I consider myself more fitted by education and habitual study to decide on what is right for a young lady like yourself. And with a low bow, he left her to attack Mr. Darcy, whose reception of his advances she clearly watched, and those astonishment as being so addressed was very evident. Her cousin prefaced his speech with a solemn bow, and though she could not hear a word of it, she felt as if hearing it all, and saw in the motion of his lips the word apology, Hunsford, and Lady Catherine de Bow. It vexed her to see him expose himself to such a man. Mr. Darcy was eyeing him with an unrestrained wonder, and when at last Mr. Collins allowed him time to speak, replied with an air of distant civility. Mr. Collins, however, was not discouraged from the speaking again, and Mr. Darcy's contempt seemed abundantly increasing with the length of his second speech, and at the end of it he only made him a slight bow, moved another way. Mr. Collins then returned to Elizabeth. Oh, okay, we're getting an ad break, which is perfect because I'm going to read your chat. Well, yeah, you need to rest. LOL. Right. You do need to rest, which is unfortunate. Mr. Darcy's cunt. Did I say that? Is that what you heard? All right, I'm going to continue. I said contempt. Is that what you heard? Or something else? I don't know. I have no reason, I assure you, said he, to be dissatisfied with my reception. Mr. Darcy seems much pleased with the attention. He answered me with the utmost civility, and even paid me the compliment of saying that he was so well convinced of Lady Catherine's discernment as to be certain she could never bestow a favour unworthily. It was a very handsome thought, Upon the whole, I am much pleased with him." As Elizabeth had no longer any interest of her own to pursue, she turned her attention almost entirely on her sister and Mr. Bingley, and the train of agreeable reflections which her observances gave birth to made her perhaps almost as happy as Jane. She saw her uh, in idea settled in that very house, in all the felicity which a marriage of true affection could bestow, and she felt capable, under such circumstances, of endeavoring even to like Mr. Bingley's two sisters. Her mother's thought, her mother's thoughts, she plainly saw, were bent the same way, and she determined not to venture near her, lest she might hear too much. When they sat down to supper, therefore, she considered it a most unlucky preservedness that placed them within one of each other, and deeply she was vexed to find that her mother was talking to that one person, Lady Lucas, freely, openly, and of nothing else but her expectation that Jane would soon be married to Mr. Bingley. It was an animating subject, and Mr. Bennet seemed incapable of fatiguing while enumerating the advantages of the match. His being such a charming young man, and so rich, and living but 3 miles from them, were the first points of self-gratification, and then it was such a comfort to think how fond the two sisters were of Jane, and to be certain that they must desire the connection as much as she could do. It was, moreover, such a promising thing for her young daughters, as Jane's marrying so greatly must throw them in the way of other rich men. And lastly, it was so pleasant at her time of life to be able to consign her single daughters to the care of their sister, that she might not be obliged to go into company more than she liked. It was necessary to make the circumstance a matter of pleasure, because on such occasions it is the etiquette. But no one was less likely than Mrs. Bennet to find comfort in staying at home at any period of her life. She concluded, with many good wishes, that Lady Lucas might soon be equally fortunate, though evidently and triumphantly believing there was no chance of it. In vain did Elizabeth endeavour to check the rapidity of her mother's words, or persuade her to describe her felicity in a less audible whisper, for, to her inexpressible vexation, she could perceive that the chief of it was overheard by Mr. Darcy, who sat opposite to them. Her mother only scolded her for being nonsensical. "What is Mr. Darcy to me, pray, that I should be afraid of him? I was sure we owe him no such particular civility as to be obliged to say nothing he may not like to hear. For heaven's sake, madam, speak lower. What advantage can it be to you to offend Mr. Darcy? You will never recommend yourself to his friend by so doing." Nothing that she could say, however, had any influence. Her mother would talk of her views in the same intelligible tone. Elizabeth blushed and blushed again with shame and vexation. She could not help frequently glancing her eye at Mr. Darcy, though every glance convinced her of what she dreaded. For though she was not always looking at her mother, she was convinced that his attention was invariably fixed on her. The expression of his face changed gradually from indignant contempt to a composed and steady gravity. At length, however, Mrs. Bennet had no more to say, and Lady Lucas, who had been long yawning at the reception of delights which she had no likelihood of sharing, was left to the comforts of cold ham and chicken. Elizabeth now began to revive, but not long was the interval of tranquillity, for when supper was over, singing was talked of, and she had the mortification of seeing Mary, after very little entreaty, preparing to oblige the company. Her many significant looks and silent entreaties, which did she endeavour to prevent such a proof of complaisance, But in vain, Mary would not understand them. Such an opportunity of exhibiting was delightful to her, and she began her song. Elizabeth's eyes were fixed on her with most painful sensations, and she watched her progress through the several stanzas with an impatience which was very ill rewarded at their close, for Mary, on the receiving amongst the thanks of the table the hint of a hope that she might be prevailed on to favor them again, after the pause of half a minute began another. Mary's powers were by no means fitted for such display. Her voice was weak, and her manner affected. Elizabeth was in agonies. She looked at Jane to see how she bore it, and Jane was most composed, talking to Bingley. She looked at his two sisters and saw them making signs of derision at each other and at Darcy, who continued, however, impenetrably grave. She looked at her father to entreat his inference, lest Mary should be singing all night. He took the hint, and when Mary had finished her second song, said aloud, "That will do extremely well, child. You've delighted us long enough. Let the other young ladies have time to exhibit." Mary, though pretended not to hear, was somewhat disconcerted, and Elizabeth, sorry for her, and sorry for her father's speech, was afraid her anxiety had done no good. Others of the party were now applied to. "If I," said Mr. Collins, "were so fortunate as to be able to sing, I should have great pleasure, I am sure, in obliging the company with an air, for I consider music to be a very innocent diversion, and particularly compatible with the profession of a clergyman. I do not mean, however, to assert that we can be justified in devoting too much of our time to music, for there are certainly other things to be attended to. The rector of a parish has much to do. In the first place, he must make such an agreement for tithes as may be beneficial to himself and not offensive to his patron. He must write his own sermons, and the time that remains will not be too much for his parish duties, and the care and improvement of his dwelling, while he cannot be executed from making as comfortable as possible. And I do not think of it as light importance that he should have attentive and conciliatory manners toward everybody, especially toward those of whom he owes his preferment. I cannot acquit him of that duty, nor could I think well of a man who should omit an occasion to testify his respect toward anyone connected with the family." And with a bow to Mr. Darcy, he concluded his speech, which had been spoken so loud as to be heard by half the room. Many stared. Many smiled, but no one looked more amused than Mr. Bennet himself, while his wife seriously commended Mr. Collins for having spoken so sensibly, and observed in a half-whisper to Lady Lucas that he was remarkably clever, good kind of young man. To Elizabeth it appeared that had her family made an agreement to expose themselves as much as they could during the evening, it would be impossible for them to play their parts with more spirit or finer success, and happy did she think it was for Bingley and her sister, and some of the exhibition had escaped his notice, that his feelings were not a sort to be much distressed by the folly which he must have witnessed. That his two sisters and Mr. Darcy, however, should have such an opportunity of ridiculing her relations was bad enough, and she could not determine whether the silent contempt of the gentlemen or the insolent smiles of the ladies were more intolerable. The rest of the evening brought her little amusement. She was teased by Mr. Collins, who continued most perseveringly by her side, and though she could not prevail with her dance with him again, put it out of her power to dance with others. In vain did she entreat to stand up with somebody else, and offer to introduce him to any young lady in the room. He assured her that, as to dancing, he was perfectly indifferent to it. that his chief object was by delicate attentions to recommend himself to her, and that he should therefore make a point of remaining close to her the whole evening. There was no arguing upon such a project. She owed her greatest relief to her friend Miss Lucas, who offered to join them, and good-natured engaged Mr. Collins' conversation to herself. She was at least free from the offence of Mr. Darcy's late farther notice, though often steady with a very short distance of her, quite disengaged, he never came near enough to speak. She felt as if to be the probable consequence of her allusions to Mr. Wickham, and rejoiced in it. The Longbourn party were the last of the company to depart, and by the manoeuvre of Mrs. Bennet had to wait for their carriages a quarter of an hour after everybody else was gone, which gave them time to see how heartily they were wished away by some of the family. Mrs. Hurst and her sisters scarcely opened their mouths except to complain of fatigue, and were evidently impatient to have their house to themselves. They repulsed every attempt of Mrs. Bennet at conversation, and by doing so threw a languor over the whole party, which was very little relieved by the long speeches of Mr. Collins, who was complimenting Mr. Bingley and his sisters on the elegance of their entertainment, and the hospitality and politeness which had remarked their behaviour to their guests. Darcy said nothing at all. Mr. Bennet, in equal silence, was enjoying the scene. Mr. Bingley and Jane were standing together, a little detached from the rest, talked only to each other. Elizabeth preserved as steadily a silence as neither Mrs. Hurst or Mr. Bingley, and even Lydia was too much fatigued to utter more than the occasional exclamation of, "Lord, how tired I am!" accompanied by a violent yawn. Now I'm gonna yawn. Because yawning is contagious, even when you see the word yawn. Isn't that crazy? Anyway. When at length they arose to take leave, Mrs. Bennet was most pressingly civil in her hope of seeing the whole family soon at Longbourn, and addressed herself particularly to Mr. Bingley, to assure him how happy he would make them, by eating a family dinner with them at any time. So contagious. Anytime, without the ceremony of a formal invitation. Bingley was all grateful pleasure, and he readily engaged for the taking the earliest opportunity of waiting on her after his return to London, whither he was obliged to go the next day for a short time. Mrs. Bennet was perfectly satisfied, and quitted the house under the delightful persuasion that, allowing for the necessary preparation of settlements, new carriages, and wedding clothes, she should undoubtedly see her daughter settled at Netherfield in the course of 3 or 4 months. Of having another daughter married to Mr. Collins, she thought with equal certainty, and with considerable, though not equal, pleasure. Elizabeth was the least dear to her of all her children, and though the man and the match were quite good enough for her, the worth of each was eclipsed by Mr. Bingley and Netherfield. Okay, that was chapter 18. And chapter 19 is only 3 pages, so I shall certainly read it. How we doing out there? Everyone take a sip of your LaCroix that you have. You must have a LaCroix. It's not LaCroix. This is a Spindrift. Okay. Chapter 19. I'm kind of curious how long it takes me to read one page. Kind of want to time myself because these pages are very long. Stopwatch. There we go. Okay, let's see how long this takes. Chapter 19. The next day opened a new scene at Longbourn. Mr. Collins made his declaration in form. Having resolved to do so without loss of time, at his leave of absence extended only to the following Saturday, and having no feelings of diffidence to make it distressing to himself even at the moment, he set about in a very orderly manner, which with all the observances which he supposed a regular part of the business. On finding Mrs. Bennet, Elizabeth, and one of the younger girls together, soon after breakfast, he addressed the mother in these words: "May I hope, madam, for your interest with your fair daughter Elizabeth, when I solicit for the honour of a private audience with her in the course of this morning?" Before Elizabeth had time for anything but a blush of surprise, Mrs. Bennet instantly answered, "Oh dear! Yes, certainly. I'm sure Lizzie will be very happy. I am sure she will have no objection. Come, Kitty, I want you upstairs." And gathering her work together, she was hastened away, when Elizabeth called out, "Who said this?" Mr. Collins. Okay. Um, "Dear ma'am, do not go. I beg you will not go. Mr. Collins must excuse me. He can have nothing to say to me that anybody need not hear. I am going away myself." "No, no, nonsense, Lizzie. I desire that you stay where you are." And upon Elizabeth seeming really, with vexed and embarrassing looks, about to escape, she added, "Lizzie, I insist upon your staying and hearing Mr. Collins." Elizabeth would not oppose such an injunction, and a moment's consideration making her also sensible that it would be wisest to get it over as soon as quietly as possible, she sat down again, and tried to conceal by incessant employment the feelings which were divided between distress and diversion. Mrs. Bennet and Kitty walked off, and as soon as they were gone, Mr. Collins began. "Believe me, my dear Miss Elizabeth, that your modesty, as far from doing you any disservice, adds rather to your other perfections. You would have been less amiable to my eyes that there had not been this little unwillingness, but allow me to assure you that I have your respected mother's permission for this address. You can hardly doubt the purpose of my discourse. However your natural delicacy may lead you to dissemble, my attention have been too marked to be mistaken. Almost as soon as I entered the house, I singled you out as the companion of my future life. But before I can run away with my feelings on this subject, perhaps it would be advisable for me to state my reasons for marrying, and moreover for coming to Hertfordshire with the design of selecting a wife, as I certainly did." The idea of Mr. Collins, with all this his solemn composure, being run away with by his feelings, made Elizabeth so near laughing that she could not use the short pause he allowed in any attempt to stop him farther, and he continued, "My reasons for marrying are, first, that I think it is a right thing for every clergyman in easy circumstances like myself to set the example of matrimony in his parish. Secondly, I am convicted it will add very greatly to my happiness. And thirdly, which perhaps I ought to have mentioned earlier, that it is the particular advice and recommendation of the very noble lady which I have had the honour of calling patroness." Twice has she condescended to give me her opinion, unasked too, on this subject. And it was the very Saturday night before I left Huntsford, between our pools at Quadrille, while Mrs. Jenkinson was arranging Miss DeBoe's footstool, and she said, "Mr. Collins, you must not marry. A clergyman like you must not marry. A clergyman like you must marry. Oh, sorry, you must marry. A clergyman like you must marry. Choose properly. Choose a gentlewoman for my sake." Hi, Colin. This guy is a waffler. What's a waffler? Choose a gentlewoman for my sake, and for your own, let her be an active, useful sort of person, not brought up high, but able to make a small income go a good way. This is my advice. Find such a woman as soon as you can. Bring her to Huntsford, and I will visit her. Allow me, by the way, to observe, my fair cousin, that I do not reckon the notice and kindness of Lady Catherine de Bow as among at least of the advantages of my power to offer. You will find her manners beyond anything I describe, and your wit and vivacity, I think, must be acceptable to her, especially when tempered with the silence and respect that her rank will inevitably excite. Thus much for my general intention in favor of matrimony. It remains to be told why my views were directed to Longhorn instead of my own neighborhood, where I assure you there are as many admirable young women. They talk nonsense. Yeah, piece of yapper. Ah, okay, got it. Definitely a waffler. For sure a waffler. Also, I can't wait. I'm already predicting Elizabeth is gonna shut him down so hard. So I'm excited to see what that will be. Oh, I forgot about the timer. Dang it. I think it took me about 4 minutes to read that page. But then I read on to the next page, so I don't know. You will find her manners beyond anything I can describe, and your wit and vivacity never lose. Thus much for my general intention to favor of matrimony. It brings to be told why my views are directed to Longbourn instead of my own neighborhood, where I assure you there are many amiable young women. But the fact is that being I am to inherit this estate after the death of your honored father, who, however, may live many years longer, I could not satisfy myself without resolving to choose a wife from among his daughters, that the loss of them might be as little as possible, and the melancholy event takes place, which, however, as I have already said, may not be for several years. This has been my motive, my fair cousin, and I flatter myself it will not sink me in your esteem. And now nothing remains for me but to assure you in the most animated language of the violence of my affection. To fortune I am perfectly indifferent, and shall make no demand of that nature on your father, since I am well aware that it could not be compiled with, and that £1,000 is the 4% which will not be yours till after your mother's decease, is all that you may ever be entitled to. On that head, therefore, I shall be uniformly silent, and you may assure yourself that no ungenerous reproach shall even pass my lips when we are married. Whoa! The terrible novelist? The terrible novelist. Thank you for the raid. Oh my gosh. 17 people. Wow. Damn. Hi. Thank you so much for the raid. I appreciate you. Wow. Well, hello everyone. What were you streaming over on your channel? Was it Terrible Novels? I just saw you pop up and was looking for a writer slash reader to raid. Thought I'd say hello. Aw, thanks. I appreciate you. What were you doing on your stream? Here on my channel, I do read alouds. Right now we're reading Jane Austen, but next week we're gonna do a spooky stories reading night. I also do a lot of poetry readings. And when I'm not doing read aloud streams, I'm doing productivity and co-working streams. So yeah, that's a little intro to my channel. I'm also in a band called Tryptophan, and we have a Twitch channel called Tryptophan Music, and we do music streams periodically. Um, Working on character backstory for my main character. It helps me to write a short story about my main character as a way to finalize their motivation and choices. Ooh, very cool. I love that. It's that is like real dedication that you write a whole entire short story about your main character just to get a better like handle on who they are. Um, that's really admirable. Heck yeah. I also offer beta reads and workshops. So tonight I got to read Sklo Gamer's Work in Progress. For me, it works better than just a character sheet. Hell yeah, that's so sick. Um, is it a main character for a novel, I'm guessing, since you're the novelist? The terrible novelist, which I doubt is true, but well, right now the main novel is stuck, so I've got to dig a little bit. Okay. Okay. Cool. Yeah, my main character is a clown that works with kids. I need to figure out what inspired her to do that job. Ah, okay. Neglectful losers. Her parents were neglectful losers, just being lazy people. I like the way that you're saying it turns out. Like, I feel like I love when artists are not like my art or like my painting or my novel or my song. Like, it's always like, what does the song need? What does the story need? What does the play need? What does the painting need? Like, it's a little disconnected from yourself. Like, it's like giving the art a life on its own, which is so cool and important. Um, so I'm glad that you figured that out. Very cool discovery. Let me give you a follow before I forget. Bam. Workshop emphasis. Hang out and get some words on the page or share your piece to review. So cool. I freaking love that. I, yeah, I try to tell people all the time for my read aloud streams, especially for my poetry nights. Like, if you have a poem, please share it with me and I'd be happy to read it on stream. Um, Helps to improve the piece and put some distance between the artist and the piece and makes the creation a little less personal. Yes, super, super important to do that. I agree with all of that. Okay. I'm going to read the rest of this page. But yes, thank you for coming here, the terrible novelist. I appreciate you. It was absolutely necessary to interrupt him now. "You are too hasty, sir," she cried. "You forget that I have made no answer. Let me do it without further loss of time. Accept my thanks for the compliment you are paying me. I am very sensible of the honor of your proposals, but it is impossible for me to do otherwise than decline them." "I am not now to learn," replied Mr. Collins with a formal wave of his hand, "that it is usual with young ladies to reject the addresses of a man whom they secretly mean to accept when he first applies for their favor, and that sometimes the refusal is repeated a second or even a third time. I am therefore by no means discouraged by what you have just said, and shall hope to lead you to the altar ere long." "Upon my word, sir," cried Elizabeth, "your hope is rather an extraordinary one, after my declaration. I do assure you that I am not one of those young ladies, if such young ladies there are, who are so daring to risk their happiness on the chance of being asked a second time. I am perfectly serious in my refusal. You could not make me happy, and I am convinced that I am the last woman in the world who would make you so. Nay, were your friend Lady Catherine to know me, I am persuaded she would find me in every respect ill qualified for the situation." "Were it certain that Lady Catherine would think so," said Mr. Collins very gravely, "but I cannot imagine that her ladyship would at all disapprove of you. And you may be certain that when I have the honor of seeing her again, I shall speak in the highest terms of your modesty, economy, and other amiable qualifications." "Indeed, Mr. Collins, all praise of me will be unnecessary. You must give me leave to judge for myself, and pay me the compliment of believing what I say. I wish you very happy and very rich, and by refusing your hand, do all in my power to prevent your being otherwise. In making me the offer, you must have satisfied the delicacy of your feelings with regard to my family, and may take possession of Longbourn estate whenever it falls, without any self-reproach. This matter may be considered, therefore, as finally settled." And rising, as she thus spoke, she would have quitted the room had not Mr. Collins thus addressed her. "When I do myself the honor of speaking to you next on this subject, I shall hope to receive a more favorable answer than you have given me, though I am far more accusing you of cruelty at present, because I know in the established custom of your sex to reject a man on the first application, and perhaps you have even now said as much to encourage my suit as would be consistent with the true delicacy of your female character." "Really, Mr. Collins," cried Elizabeth with some warmth, "you puzzle me exceedingly. If what I have hitherto said cannot appear to you in the form of encouragement, I know not how to express my refusal in such a way as may convince you of its being one. You must give me leave to flatter myself, my dear cousin, that your refusal of my addresses is merely words of course. My reasons for believing it are briefly these. It does not appear to me that my hand is unworthy of your acceptance, or the establishment I can offer you would be any other than highly desirable. My situation in life, my connections with the family of Debeau, my relationship to your own, are circumstances highly in favor, and you should take it into further consideration that, in spite of your manifold attractions, it is by no means certain that another offer of marriage may ever be made to you. Your portion is unhappily so small that it will, in all likelihood, undo the effects of your loveliness and amiable qualifications. As I must therefore conclude that you are not serious in your rejection of me, I shall choose to attribute it to your wish of increasing my love by suspense, according to the unusual practice of elegant females. I do assure you, sir, that I have no pretension whatever to that kind of elegance which consists in tormenting a respectful man. I would rather be paid the compliment of having believed sincere. I thank you again and again for the honor of having done in your proposals, but to accept them is absolutely impossible. My feelings in every respect forbid it. Can I speak plainer? Do not consider me now as an elegant female intending to plague you, but as a rational creature, speaking the truth from her heart. You are uniformly charming, cried he with an air of awkward gallantry, and I am persuaded that when sanctioned by the express authority of both your excellent patroness, I lost my part. And I'm persuaded that when sanctioned by the express authority of your excellent parents, my proposals will not fail of being acceptable. To such perseverance in wilful self-deception, Elizabeth would make no reply, and immediately and in silence withdrew, determined, as if persisted in continuing her repeated refusals as flattering encouragement, to apply to her father, whose negative might be uttered in such a manner as much be decisive, and whose behavior, at least, could be mistaken for the affection and coquetry of an elegant female. It's a no from me, dog. Yeah, literally. This was the best chapter so far because it had the most juicy drama. Mr. Collins, man. He is so annoying. And I freaking love Elizabeth. What a powerhouse. Okay. The next chapter is yet again only 3 pages, so I certainly will read it, and then I will be done for the night and we'll end the stream. Man, Mr. Collins. That was an exciting chapter. Okay. Okay. Mr. Collins was not left long to the silent contemplation of his successful love, for Mrs. Bennet, having dawdled about in the vestibule to watch for the end of the conference, no sooner saw Elizabeth open the door and with quick step pass her towards the staircase. Then she entered the breakfast room and congratulated both him and herself in warm terms on the happy prospect of their nearer connection. Mr. Collins received and returned these felicitations with equal pleasure, and then proceeded to relate the particulars of their interview, with the result of which he trusted he had every reason to be satisfied, since the refusal which his cousin had steadfastly given him would naturally flow from her bashful modesty and the genuine delicacy of her nature. So they're cousins? This is getting worse and worse. I'm confused. This information, however, startled Mrs. Bennet. She would have been glad to be equally satisfied with her daughter had meant to encourage him by protesting against his proposals, but she dared not believe it. I could not help saying so. But depend upon it, Mr. Collins, she added. Didn't they learn from the Habsburgs? God. I spelled it wrong. I'm not familiar with them. Who are these people? Is this another book, or is this like a pop culture thing? But depend upon it, Mr. Collins, she added, that Lizzie shall be brought to reason. I will speak to her about it myself directly. She is a very headstrong, foolish girl, and does not know her own interest, but I will make her know it. They were, I think it was the Spanish royal family. Ah, okay. Wow. I didn't know that. Us Spaniards, we do some kooky things. Pardon me for interrupting you, madam, cried Mr. Collins, but if she is really headstrong and foolish, I know not whether she would altogether be a very desirable wife for a man in my situation, who naturally looks for happiness in the marriage state. If therefore she actually persists in rejecting my suit, perhaps it were better not to force her into accepting me, because if liable to such defects of temper, she could not contribute much to my felicity. Sir, you misunderstand me, Mrs. Bennet said, alarmed. Lizzie is only headstrong in such manners as these. In everything else, she is as good-natured a girl as ever lived. I will go directly to Mr. Bennet, and we shall very soon settle it with her, I am sure. Oh gosh. It's funny the words that they choose to censor on Twitch. The family tree, it ain't a tree, it's a circle. His dad was like his granddad and dad, but his mom was also his aunt. I don't know, it wasn't good. He had a kid that was so inbred. His inbreeding. Hello. Oh my god, the Twitch app sucks so much. Inbred. His inbreeding coefficient was higher than if his parents were brother and sister. Ugh. Ugh. I hate that. Yeah, they kept it too much in the family. There is such a thing. She would not give him time to reply, but hurrying instantly to her husband, called out as she entered the library, "Oh, Mr. Bennet, you are wanted immediately. We are all in an uproar. You must come and make Lizzie marry Mr. Collins, for she vows she will not have him. And if you do not make haste, he will change his mind, and not have her." Mr. Bennet raised his eyes from the book as she entered, and fixed them on her face with a calm unconcern which was not in the least altered by her communication. "I have not the pleasure of understanding you," said he, when he had finished his speech. "Of what are you talking?" "Of Mr. Collins and Lizzie. Lizzie declares she will not have Mr. Collins, and Mr. Collins begins to say that he will not have Lizzie. And what am I to do on the occasion? It seems a hopeless business." "Speak to Lizzie about it yourself. Tell her that you insist upon her marrying him." "Let her be called down. She shall hear my opinion." Mrs. Bennet rang the bell, and Miss Elizabeth was summoned to the library. "Come here, child," cried the father, as she appeared. "I have sent for you on an affair of importance. I understand that Mr. Collins has made an offer of marriage. Is it true?" Elizabeth replied that it was. Very well. And this offer of marriage you have refused? I have, sir. Very well. We now come to the point. Your mother insists on your accepting. Is not it so, Mrs. Bennet? Yes, or I will never see her again. An unhappy alternative is before you, Elizabeth. From this day, you must now be a stranger to one of your parents. Your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins, and I will never see you again if you do. Elizabeth could not but smile at such a conclusion of such a beginning, but Mrs. Bennet, who had persuaded herself that her husband regarded the affair as she wished, was excessively disappointed. What do you mean, Mr. Bennet, by talking this way? You promised me to insist upon her marrying him. My dear, replied her husband, I have 2 small favors to request. First, that you will allow me the free use of my understanding of this present occasion, and secondly, of my room. I shall be glad to have the library to myself, as soon as may be. Documentaries and stuff that go over it. Ah, interesting. Cool. Thanks for letting me know, Doom. Not yet, however, in spite of her disappointment in her husband, did Mrs. Bennet give up the point. She talked to Elizabeth again and again, coaxed and threatened her by turns. She endeavored to secure Jane in her interest, but Jane, with all possible mildness, declined interfering, and Elizabeth, sometimes with real earnestness and sometimes with playful gaiety, replied to her attacks. Though her manner varied, however, her determination never did. Mr. Collins, meanwhile, was meditating in solitude on what had passed. He thought too well of himself to comprehend on what motive his cousin would refuse him, and thought his pride was hurt. He suffered in no other way. His regard for her was quite imaginary, and the possibility of her deserving her mother's reproach prevented his feeling any regret. While the family were in this confusion, Charlotte Lucas came to spend the day with them. She was met in the vestibule by Lydia, who, flying to her, cried in a half-whisper, I am glad you have come, for there is so much fun here. What did you think has happened this morning? Mr. Collins has made an offer to Lizzie, and she will not have him. Charlotte had hardly any time to answer before they were joined by Kitty, who came to tell the same news, and so sooner they had entered the breakfast room where Mrs. Bennet was alone than she lightly began the subject, calling on Miss Lucas for her compassion and entreating her to persuade her friend Lizzie to comply with the wishes of all her family. Pray do, my dear Miss Lucas, she added in a melancholy tone, for nobody is on my side, nobody takes part with me, and I am cruelly used, nobody feels my poor nerves. Charlotte's reply was spared by the entrance of Jane and Elizabeth. Aye, there she comes, continues Mrs. Bennet, looking as unconcerned as may be, and caring no more for us as if we were at York, provided she can have her own way. But I tell you what, Miss Lizzie, if you take it into your head to go on refusing every offer of marriage in this way, you will never get a husband at all. And I am sure I do not know who is to maintain you when your father is dead. I shall not be able to keep you, and so I warn you, I have done with you from this very day. I told you in the library, you know, that I should never speak to you again, and you will find me as good as my word. I have no pleasure in taking in undutiful children. Not that I have much pleasure, indeed, in taking in anybody. People who suffer, as I do, from nervous complaints can have no great inclination for talking. Nobody can tell what I suffer, but it is always so. Those who do not complain are never pitied. Her daughters listened in silence to this effusion, sensible by any attempt of reason with so soothe her, with her increase the irritation. She talked on, Therefore, without interruption from any of them, till they were joined by Mr. Collins, who entered with an air more stately than usual, and on perceiving whom, she said to the girls, "Now, I do insist upon it, that all of you hold your tongues, and let Mr. Collins and me have a little conversation together." You know, she kind of reminds me, Mrs. Bennet reminds me of Madame Featherington from Bridgerton. They're just both like insufferable. Anyway, okay. Elizabeth passed quietly out of the room. Jane and Kitty followed, but Lydia stood her ground, determined to hear all she could. And Charlotte, detained first by the civility of Mr. Collins, whose enquiries after herself and all the family were very minute, and then by a little curiosity, satisfied herself with walking to the window and pretending not to hear. In a doleful voice, Mrs. Bennet thus began the projected conversation. "Oh, Mr. Collins!" "My dear madam," replied he, "let us be forever silent on this point. Far be it from me," he presently continued in a voice that marked his displeasure, "to resent the behavior of your daughter. Resignation to inevitable evils is the duty of us all, the peculiar duty of a young man who has been so fortunate as I have been in early preferment, and I trust I am resigned. Perhaps not the less so from a feeling of doubt of my positive happiness, had my fair cousin honored me with her hand, for I have often observed that resignation is never so perfect as when the blessing denied begins to lose somewhat of its value in our estimation. You will not, I hope, consider me as showing any disrespect to your family, my dear madam, by thus withdrawing my pretensions to your daughter's favor, without having paid yourself and Mr. Bennet the compliment of requesting you to interpose your authority in my behalf. My conduct may, I fear, be objectionable in having accepted my dismission from your daughter's lips instead of your own. But we are all liable to error. I have certainly meant well through the whole affair. My object has been to secure an amiable companion for myself, with all due consideration for the advantage of all your family, and if my manner has been at all reprehensible, I here beg leave to apologize. That was a good chapter. 1, 2, 3. Okay, but with this, I am going to leave now. But to everyone that came in for the raid, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. I'm going to send you somewhere else since there are so many of you. Oh. Hmm. Okay. I'm going to send you to Maiko. Okay, enjoy. Thank you everyone for being here. And start.